Are the Baltimore Ravens true Super Bowl contenders? We talk about that and more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We're, of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes over on YouTube as well in video form. And if you're hearing this on YouTube, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you're in audio form, be sure to subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We do put out daily Ravens content 5 days per week. So if you want Ravens analysis, Ravens news, updates, etc., we are the place for you here. Also, today's episode of Locked On Ravens is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you win into 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. And we are back here. So the Ravens did not play in week 10. Obviously, they have their bye week. And again, right in that sweet spot of the bye week, which I really like, that week 9 to week 11 range. But it was a crazy NFL Sunday. We had the game of the year with Buffalo and Minnesota. The Packers and Cowboys played a really good game too. Quarterback changes everywhere. Backups coming in, unexpected start. So it was nice to kind of enjoy it when you don't have to kind of cover and watch and do whatever. But felt kind of off without Ravens football. I missed Baltimore playing. So excited to get back into that as the week progresses here. But today we're going to be talking about if the Ravens are true Super Bowl contenders. We'll dive into that conversation in the second segment and I'll give my thoughts, my opinions on it. In the first and third segments, though, we're going to do like a mid-season-ish review where we're going to look back in this first segment, talking about what the Ravens have already done, look at their schedule, who they've played. Then in the final segment, we'll look ahead to their schedule and who they will be playing coming up here. So a ton to dive into. Also, we have new thumbnails. If you're on YouTube and you clicked on this video, you might have noticed that the thumbnails look a little different. We're doing that starting today. We're going to be trickling in some new things here over the coming weeks. I'm excited for it. So new thumbnails, that's number one. And then I'm excited to kind of trickle in some new things here. But let's now dive into the content. Let's just take a step back and look at what Baltimore's done so far. Now, this is going to be schedule-wise. We'll do a schedule review for Baltimore. So what I'm going to have is Baltimore's actual schedule, and we're just going to go through the stats for each of their games and look at what they've done through these first 9 weeks of the season. So obviously, we start in week 1 with the Jets. This was a good win for them, 24-9 over those Joe Flacco-led Jets. So the Ravens legend, obviously, Joe Flacco. Lamar Jackson, 17-30, 213, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Joe Flacco ended up throwing for 309 yards and a touchdown, also an interception. But Baltimore, they were generating pressure on Joe Flacco. We saw a very good game from the interior in this one. Marcus Williams gets his first Ravens interception, which was great. The run game was not good in this one. For those, obviously it's been a while since week 1, but I've definitely blocked out the run game didn't work thing because let me tell you, and I know people remember the run game, didn't really work in the first couple weeks of the season. The Ravens only averaged 3 yards per carry. Kenyon Drake 2.8, Lamar 2.8. Mike Davis actually was 5.5, but only on 2 carries, and Justice Hill 2. Rashad Bateman only 2 catches. He had a long touchdown, though, a 55-yarder, and that was kind of the story of his season before he went out, right, where he was catching those long touchdowns, and then he'd have a catch here and a catch there, but he was that big play threat for them. Devin Duvernay stepped up in this one too for 2 touchdowns, 4 for 54 and 2 touchdowns for him. On defense, again, I mentioned Marcus Williams. I thought, again, just Big played well. Patrick Queen had 9 tackles. So this was overall, I think, a very solid start to their year. This is what I think they wanted. Just a pretty dominant win, I'd say, front to back. But then you get to the Dolphins game and you're thinking you're entering the fourth quarter, oh yeah, Ravens are going 2-0. They're up big, and then all of a sudden, the fourth quarter collapse happens, 28-3 for Miami in that fourth quarter. Tua Tagovailoa just goes insane. 36 of 50, 469, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. It's a game that I don't have fun talking about. I'm sure people don't have fun listening to it, so we'll kind of very quickly gloss over this one. Marcus Williams, 2 interceptions. He had the one where he was literally on the ground. The ball came to him on the ground. He caught it. Then the toe tapping one, and he didn't even think he got it. He didn't even think he got the interception on the second one. So it was funny to kind of hear the mic'd up version of that. But Lamar went 21 to 29, 318, 3 touchdowns. This was a really, really good Lamar game. And unfortunately, this was not a good defense game in the fourth quarter. I don't think this was a good Mike Macdonald fourth quarter, where this was like learning. This was a learning experience for Mike Macdonald. I think the calls might have been a little too aggressive down the stretch, and Miami was taking advantage with 60-yard touchdowns, 40-yard touchdowns, collapse here, collapse there, and it results in Baltimore going 1-1. So they could have had a really good couple things going with momentum to start the year, but unfortunately the 42-38 loss kind of squandered that one. So they had to respond, right? They had to respond against New England in week 3. It's always tough to go play in Foxborough. Baltimore did it, though. Lamar, again, continued his hot start to the year. This game really, I think, cemented him early at the top of the MVP conversation, 18 to 29, 218. He had 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. The run game was better in this one. I forgot to mention Miami. The run game was abysmal. So first 2 weeks, not good. Third game, J.K. Dobbins comes back. You get Marcus Peters back in week 2. Dobbins only 7 for 23, but Lamar carried on the ground. 11 for 107 and a score. Justice Hill had a really good game. Hill's looked really good. He's looked explosive. I've been really impressed with him. Mark Andrews, 8 for 89 and 2 scores. Duvernay scores another touchdown. Josh Oliver with a score. Mac Jones, the Ravens have him throw 3 interceptions. This is a team that has been a very high turnover team. We'll talk about that in the second segment, but I've been impressed. Marcus Peters, Josh Bynes, Marlon Humphrey, all with interceptions, and we cannot forget that play by Kyle Hamilton to chase down Nelson Aguilar. Because the Patriots were on the comeback trail. Nelson Aguilar catches that ball. He's running on the field. Kyle Hamilton, after taking accountability for some of those week 2 miscommunications, comes back and steps up. And that's what I love to see. The accountability turned into on-field production. We saw that from Kyle Hamilton. So big shout out to him. And he's balling out right now. He's doing really well. So again, the Ravens have the opportunity to get momentum. But in week 4, there is the controversial decision on 4th down when the Ravens, they could take the lead with a field goal late inside the Buffalo 10, inside the Buffalo 5, and Baltimore opts to go for it on 4th down. They don't get it. Buffalo drives down the field and scores the go-ahead game-winning field goal. And I still would have taken the points personally. I said that on the show after the game, and I will stick by that decision. Lamar didn't have a great game, at least compared to what he was doing earlier in the season there. 20 to 29, 144, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. The ground game, 4.9 yards per carry. The ground game really found its stride after that week 3 game. Devin Duvernay led the team 4 for 51. Josh Allen didn't have a great game, though. The defense, I think, played pretty relatively well. 19 to 36, 213, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. If you say, hey, the Ravens defense will hold Josh Allen to that, I'll say, all right, for how good he is, fine. So I think Baltimore's defense definitely limited Josh Allen in this one, but unfortunately the loss comes. But the next week, the win comes for him, and they shut down another good quarterback in Joe Burrow to the tune of 217 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. So good on the Ravens defense, holding two of the best quarterbacks in the league to under 220 yards passing each. Lamar Jackson, again, not really a great game from him, 19 to 32, 174, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. The ground game, again, kept it going, 5.5 yards per carry. Mark Andrews, that 8 for 89, that stat line. He has a score in there as well. So Baltimore gets the win. It was a close game. The Bengals tried to fight back at the end, but Baltimore gets the job done. They're big divisional win for Baltimore there. So they're 3-2, and they're saying once again, build the momentum. But unfortunately, the fourth quarter collapses continue here. This game hurts. They should have won this one. Giants game, everybody knows Lamar Jackson, the bad exchange between Linderbaum and Jackson. And Jackson throws the ball into double coverage of Patrick Ricard. And the rest is history. The Ravens are up in that situation. There was the whole illegal formation penalty where the Ravens, they got the first down and they have to run another play. And that was the play that happened. And it was disaster. So Baltimore loses another fourth quarter lead. And there were things to fix. There was a lot of controversy in Baltimore surrounding what they needed to do, who needs to get fired, who needs to get cut. The Ravens did their job holding Saquon Barkley to 22 carries for 83 yards, 3.8 yards per carry. So again, I think the defense didn't get helped out. Again, they were put back in their own territory on a couple of these plays on these turnovers. So Lamar Jackson did not have a great 3-week stretch. He finished 17-32, 210 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. But then Baltimore begins to start to get on track. 23-20 over Cleveland in week 7. They surpassed their division win total from last season. They went 1-5 in the division last year. Baltimore almost let Cleveland win the game in the fourth quarter, but they saw that they actually don't have to do everything perfectly in order to win the game. So they end up beating them 23-20. Lamar Jackson was not, he only completed 9 passes, had 16 pass attempts total. So 9-16 for 120 for Jackson in this one. But then we have the 2 back-to-back primetime games that have just looked great, night and day. Well, I'll say the second half of the Bucs game, 27-22 over Tampa Bay in week 8. They hold Tom Brady to just 1 touchdown. Lamar Jackson throws for 2. The run game, this was a very run-heavy script. But it was both, right? The Ravens actually attempted more passes, but they had 33 runs as well, so they just ran a ton of plays. But Jackson and that Ravens offense, they tried to throw the ball in the first half, didn't really work. They adjust the game plan, run the ball a ton in the second half, and it worked, and credit to them. And then you go into week 9 against the Saints. This was pure domination front to back. The Ravens, this was their most complete win of the season. This was their most impressive win of the season. To me, this was a game that, could have gone either way. The Saints were dealing with injuries. The Ravens dealing with injuries, but they have Lamar Jackson throw 22 times, 12 completions, 133 and a score. But the run game, this was the actual run-heavy script for the entirety of it. 40 rushes, 188 yards. And this was, Kenyon Drake stepping up, Lamar Jackson stepping up, Isaiah Likely stepping up in a way. He had that 1 touchdown on his 1 catch. So Baltimore through 9 weeks, there have been a ton of ups, there have been a ton of downs, but they did enter that bye week at 6-3. And in the third segment, we'll talk a bit about what they could finish after the stretch of games they have here coming up. And in the second segment, we'll be diving into if the Ravens truly are Super Bowl contenders here in 2022. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Still a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is sponsored by Total Wine and More. This holiday, find what you love at Total Wine and More with so many great bottles to choose from. It's easy to find your favorite single barrel bourbon or the perfect gifts for everyone on your list with some help from a friendly guide, and all with the confidence of knowing you found something special for the lowest price. Find what you love what you find only at Total Wine and More. They have curbside delivery and pickup available in most areas. It's a great experience, and they have amazing selections for those low prices. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly. Be 21. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens here on Monday. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. Thank you so much for tuning in again, making us your first listen of the day. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the support. Be sure to make your second listen Locked On Sports today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. But let's talk about the big question here. The big one, are the Ravens Super Bowl contenders? And look, my short answer is yes. Now we're going to dive into the long answer over the course of these next couple minutes here. But I really do think Baltimore is a true Super Bowl contender. I know they're again, we talked about it in the first segment. There have been a lot of ups. There have been a lot of downs this year. But the key for me, or at least one of them, and we'll talk about multiple, but Baltimore has the momentum right now at 6-3. They've won 3 straight games, and the last 2, or maybe 1.5, depending what you want to classify that Bucs game as, they've looked really, really good. It seems like the defense has found their stride. This was the team that was bottom 5, bottom 10 in a lot of categories over the first 2-3, like the first month-ish of the season. The Ravens have climbed up, and, looking at the pure box score, the numbers aren't going to necessarily blow you away or anything, but Baltimore right now, they have climbed their way to being the 10th rated rush defense at 4.3 yards per attempt given up. They are now the 20th rated pass defense with 6.3 net yards per attempt through the air given up. So they have climbed up from, 31st and 25th and 26th and all those ranks. They're slowly creeping up, but they're also getting guys back. Like, this is a team that they lost a lot last year. They lost Gus Edwards. They lost J.K. Dobbins. They lost Marcus Peters, etc. I could go on forever. But they are now starting to get those guys back, and they're continuing to get those guys back. And it's something that we talked about a lot last week, where week 2, you get Marcus Peters back. Week 3, it's J.K. Dobbins. Then you get Ronnie Stanley in week 5. And then Gus Edwards comes back. And then everybody's coming back. Tyus Bowser comes back last week against the Saints. Now, Dobbins goes back out. Edwards has to miss the Saints game, obviously. But so that means you're going to get Dobbins back. You're going to get Edwards back. Marcus Williams is coming back. David Ajabo, Charlie Kohler, all these pieces. There are more too. Mark Andrews. All these pieces are coming back to a team that is finding its rhythm. The roster, I think, is really it's deep right now at a lot of positions. Is it deep everywhere? No. There are holes on the roster. I'm not saying it is a perfect roster. Wide receiver, I still think they could add there. Corner is definitely a little iffy if they lose any of the studs, Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters. You could point to maybe a couple others, but adding Roquan Smith in there, adding all these guys back, and now the fact defense in particular has found their stride. The offense, I think, has found an identity too, right? It felt a little bit like 2020. I know I've made this comparison before, but it felt like 2020 early on when they were trying to find themselves this season. In 2020, they took months to find their identity. They really only found it the last 1 or 2 months of the season. And then the last month of the year that year, they ran for like 200 yards a game on opponents, just absolutely running the ball down teams' throats. And that was supposed to be the identity all along after 2019, which was that historic rushing offense, 14-2. The Ravens, I think, were trying to become a more balanced offense, which they did in theory, but they were getting away from the run game, I think, a bit too much that year. Then when they went back to it and kind of embraced that identity, they started blowing teams out of the water. I think we started to see something similar to that where, look, I think the Ravens can be a more balanced offense where they can run the ball, they can throw the ball, but the offensive identity should still be a run-first team. That doesn't mean that Lamar Jackson shouldn't throw the ball. He absolutely should. He's super talented in that area, and I want him to do that. But I think the first identity of this team should be running the football because they're just so good at it. The offensive line, that's another reason I think the Super Bowl contenders, the offensive line is playing at a high level. And I think for me on offense, at least, well, both on its offense and defense, it starts up front. Baltimore's offensive line went through so many combinations last season. We saw Alejandro Villanueva, which no comment, played at left tackle for a while there. And, he's someone who I think a lot of players liked, but on the field, the production was not something you liked. So it was difficult because they signed him to play right tackle. Then he has to move over because Stanley's down. They lose all these guys and they have to shuffle and shuffle and shuffle. The offensive line this year has been so great. I mean, you have Tyler Linderbaum playing at a high level as a rookie at center. The tackles, Ronnie Stanley is back. Ronnie Stanley is Ronnie Stanley. You have Morgan Moses, who, I'd say has been okay, but even okay is okay when you're talking about what the Ravens dealt with last year there, and Patrick McCarry's filled in when needed in multiple different spots. So great for him. Kevin Zeitler. He's steady as ever. And then Ben Powers in that competition in the preseason has looked really, really good so far. So yeah, look, I think Baltimore's offensive line is playing great right now. You have Jackson, who obviously I think keeps you in any game and puts you in any game with what he can do. I think defensively, the defensive line is starting to come together a little bit. You have Justin Houston playing at like an all-pro level right now, 8.5 sacks in 6 games. That's a Locked On Ravens legend right there, Justin Houston. We love Justin Houston over here. Then you have, again, the addition of Roquan Smith. He can play off of Patrick Queen, who himself is having a very nice season. In the secondary, we talked about Kyle Hamilton. Marcus Williams coming back is going to be huge. Geno Stone has played so great. Big shout out to Geno Stone. Marlon Humphrey looks like Marlon Humphrey. Marcus Peters, I think, is playing well, even though PFF might not necessarily agree with that. So how much stock you put in PFF grades might change your answer on what you think about Marcus Peters. But this is a deep roster. They have a lot of star power. Health obviously has to continue to go their way, and they have to continue to get guys back and not lose them. They've lost some key pieces, obviously. Rashad Bateman going down. You lose Jawan James, Kyle Fuller, Michael Pierce, etc. But I think right now they do have depth. The schedule is looking great. We'll talk about that in the final segment here. But I do think Baltimore truly is a Super Bowl contender this year offensively. They have the top rush offense in the NFL, averaging 5.5 yards per carry. They are a middling pass offense. They're 16th in the league, 6.1 net yards per attempt, but they're averaging the 4th most points per drive at 2.41. They're holding the ball for the fifth most times per drive, or the time per drive is 3 minutes and 3 seconds. That does rank fifth in the NFL. They have really good starting field position too. You want to know who that's a credit to? Devin Duvernay. Devin Duvernay is a returner, has put the Ravens in position to set up really well. They are starting at their own 30.9-yard line, which again is third in the NFL. So they're doing a lot. They are again a high turnover defense. That's not something we saw. They've already surpassed their 2021 total this year in 2022 with turnovers. That's something you have to have. If you want to win, you have to get the momentum back on your side and limit the opposing offense from scoring. And part of that is getting the ball back into your offense's hands. Sack-wise are starting to come around a little bit. That's big on Justin Houston for doing that. But it seems like everything is coming together for them. Plus, we're just seeing really weird football this year. Like it's upsets are happening left and right. There's no like true contender. Like Buffalo lost to Minnesota in week 10. It really seems like out of everyone, Philadelphia is the true like number one contender in the NFL right now. But Kansas City's looked mortal at times. Minnesota does have its flaws. I think in the AFC, you're talking about other teams. Cincinnati, you talk about Tennessee. These are teams I think the Ravens can definitely match up with, can definitely beat. This is a team that I think contends for a Super Bowl this season. I think the division is theirs to lose. Now, there are a lot of factors that do depend on it. The Ravens have to continue to play good football. They cannot hurt themselves like they did earlier in the season with penalties, with poor execution, with poor play calling. I think some of the stuff we saw in the Saints game, the effort on the Juwan Johnson touchdown, the weird sequence in the red zone where Lamar Jackson kind of spikes the ball because he's frustrated that he's not getting to the line and that the plays aren't getting in, etc. That's stuff they have to fix, and I hope they have fixed over the bye week. But I do think Baltimore's a true Super Bowl contender. They have the talent to do it. They have the coaching staff to do it. They have the roster to do it. They have everything, I think. Now, I think they could still use a wideout, but apparently Odell Beckham does not have Baltimore on a short list. We talked about that a bit on Friday. But to me, I think Baltimore has the pieces. So we'll see if they can end up putting something together here. But I think they're well-positioned to make a run. And I do think my final answer, if you couldn't guess, and I told you, I think they are true Super Bowl contenders here for the 2022-2023 season. Coming up here in our final segment, though, we'll be diving into what's ahead for Baltimore and how they could make that run. We'll talk about their schedule, so be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to dive into here on Locked On Ravens. First, though, this episode of Locked On Ravens is presented by Prize Picks, and again, fantasy. I love it. I had a decent week. Again, so many quarterback changes, and I had to shuffle guys because, Kyler was out, and I had to put in John Wolford from the Rams, and that went great. And so it's crazy how fantasy works. And if you want a different twist on fantasy, be sure to try out Prize Picks. I love how easy it is to use and how easy it is to play. And you also can have a ton of current entries as well. And how it works is you pick 2 to 5 players, and if they will go score more or less in their Prize Picks rejection, you can earn up to 10 times money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. So it's you versus the rejections available. Prize Picks offers rejections on any sport that you watch, including the NFL, the NBA, the MLB. You have NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball, and so much more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They have safe and fast withdrawals, and they're currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Now, the PrizePicks app, go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code locked on. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. You deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget that the promo code locked on and sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. We're back here, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, rounding out the show with you here today. And of course, thank you so much again for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow along with us in audio form as well. But let's now talk about Baltimore's upcoming schedule. It's easy compared to what they went through earlier in the season. They had some tough games early on here, but Baltimore's strength of schedule, top of the league. They have teams that don't really have winning records. Again, only Cincinnati is the team that has a winning record moving forward for Baltimore. I put out their schedule before the Week 10 games. I'm going to do it again, actually, I think sometime this week on Twitter. But Week 11, they play versus Carolina at home. So after that 2-game road trip, they come back to Carolina and play. Carolina won on Thursday night against Atlanta. They're 3-7 right now, but it just feels to me Carolina has an underrated roster. Like, I like a lot of their pieces, but they need a quarterback. I don't think PJ Walker's the answer. I don't think it's Baker Mayfield. I don't think it's Sam Darnold. Maybe it's Matt Corral. I don't really know, but I think that Baltimore can take advantage of Carolina and win that game. There are no easy wins in the NFL. We talked about that at the end of Friday. But I do think that Baltimore does pick up I think that they win this one. I'll say that. Week 12, then they go to Jacksonville. Jacksonville right now is, they do have talent. Trevor Lawrence is a quarterback that can definitely put up some numbers. Christian Kirk he's worked out great. For as much flack as that deal got, he's worked out really well there in Jacksonville. They got Zay Jones. They have some pieces on defense as well, but that's a game you probably should win. You should probably be able to shut down Travis Etienne and be able to cover up on Christian Kirk. So I think that Jacksonville, they should win that game. They're a 3-7 football team. So same thing as Carolina. Week 13, the Ravens play Denver. Denver lost again. Denver's weird this year. Russell Wilson has not been good. It's been a very weird year in Denver. I think Baltimore should win that game also. I think that while Russell Wilson is a veteran, he's played against Baltimore before. We understand what happened the last time Russell Wilson faced off against Marcus Peters, and that Baltimore defense. It was Marcus Peters. That was the first game for Marcus Peters, and Peters ends up picking off Wilson for a pick 6. But yeah, I don't know. Denver has a good defense. They definitely have a good defense. They have talented wide receivers, Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton. They have Ravens legend Latavius Murray over there too. But again, I think the Ravens should probably win that game. Then you get into the divisional stretch of the season here, where they have 4 of their last 5 matchups are against divisional opponents. They have kind of a divisional opponent sandwich here. You have the Steelers, who actually beat New Orleans. New Orleans is in shambles right now, but Pittsburgh beat New Orleans. They're 3-6. Baltimore travels to Heinz Field to play Pittsburgh in Week 14. Divisional games are tough. The Ravens and Steelers always play each other tough. It's outside of very limited circumstances. So that's a game to watch out for. Cleveland, they go to Cleveland, so another 2-game little road trip there. Cleveland lost, so they're 3-6, and this will be Deshaun Watson. So the Ravens faced off against Jacoby Brissett in the first game. It will be Deshaun Watson in the second game, so we'll see how Deshaun Watson looks. He obviously is probably going to be very rusty, so I don't know. It's a game you got to look at, but we'll see about that one. Then Week 16, the Ravens come back home, play the Falcons. The Falcons did lose on Thursday night to Carolina, so they're 4-6 right now. Maybe it'll be Desmond Ridder by that point. Mariota did not look good. He did not look good against Carolina on Thursday. So maybe by the time the Falcons travel to Baltimore, it will be Desmond Ridder. And I always say against those young first, second, third year signal callers who haven't seen this Baltimore defense for the first time, Baltimore usually has a ton of success. So I think that should be a win for the Ravens. Then you have the Steelers again in Week 17. They travel to M&T Bank Stadium. So the Steelers, again, we talked about them. They are 3-6 right now. Divisional games are always tough. They're always tough, and then they end their season Week 18 at the Bengals. The Bengals are 5-4 right now. They had the bye week just like Baltimore did. And I think that's a game where Cincinnati is going to be, I guess, looking for revenge because of what happened in Week 5. I think that's a game Baltimore might lose, especially if they have the division all but locked up and they maybe want to rest some guys, whatever their decision may be there. I know the last time Baltimore decided to rest some guys. Didn't really work out the way they wanted it to in the end after losing to Tennessee in the divisional round after their bye. But I still think that could be a really tough one. So as I've talked about, I do think Baltimore has 2 losses here in their schedule. So I think they lose to Cleveland. I think they lose to Cincinnati. I think they beat Pittsburgh twice. Personally, I think if it's Kenny Pickett there, even if it's Trubisky, I think Baltimore's defense should be able to stifle what the Steelers have going there. But we'll see. Any of these games can go any way. There are no easy wins in the NFL. And with how weird this season has been, upsets can happen everywhere. So Baltimore's probably going to be favored in a lot of these games, if not all of them. I think that they deserve to be after what they've shown over these past couple of weeks here. And if they can continue to stack that momentum, it's going to be so huge because it gives you run for the playoffs where if you can go on a little win streak here, they're on a 3-game win streak right now, but if you can extend that to 5, to 6, to 7, you continue to stack the confidence. And I think that's good for a team like this who knows they're good, who knows they can do a lot of damage in this league. But it's almost like in basketball where you have to kind of, if you're in a shooting slump, you have to see one go down to really almost get out of it. And if you're shooting and you're missing from the field and you're shooting, missing threes and missing mid-range, if you get fouled to get to the line and you shoot the free throw and you see that one go down, that's the spark. And then all of a sudden, things start to fall for you. Start hitting the threes, hitting the mid-ranges. It felt like Baltimore's spark was Cleveland in Week 7, seeing that they can win football games and not collapse in the fourth quarter, even when things go wrong. And so, again, if you can continue to stack those performances and take momentum into the playoffs, I think that'll be really good for him. So again, I think Baltimore ends up losing 2 games here. So, Panthers win, Jaguars win, Broncos win, Steelers win, Browns loss, Falcons win, Steelers win, and Bengals loss. So what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6-2. Quick math here on Lockdown Ravens. So I have them going 6-2 on the year. So we'll see. I think Baltimore, again, they are poised to do a lot of good things. I think they're positioned well, and we'll see. They just have to execute. They have to be able to stay disciplined. There's a lot that could happen. There is a lot. There are no guarantees at the NFL level. So Baltimore has to continue to play hard, not overlook opponents. Sometimes they will play down to opponents. We've seen it happen. They also play up to opponents. It goes both ways. But I like Baltimore a lot this year. I think they definitely have what it takes to make a deep playoff run and definitely win their division. And we'll see what happens. A lot of unknown right now, but I do like what they have going on right now. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to get back in tomorrow. We're diving into more Ravens content, so be sure to stay tuned for that. And I will see you right back in tomorrow.